So as we think about this, we want to realize that your dog is only going to be able to smell something if that odor is available to you. And in this presentation, you're going to see some of the things that are barriers to availability and how you can manage them. And the first thing that we think about when we think about odor is the amount. Is it a small odor source or a big one? And there's a lot of controversy about, can a dog that's trained only on big odors find small ones and vice versa? Or are dogs that have only been taught to find small odors, are they overwhelmed by big ones and they don't want to go to source? The amount is really important, almost as important as the amount. Like if you look at that bundle of dynamite there, you think about this. All right, that's a big bang, but it's not as big a bang as this. It's a pure difference in quantity, but as important as the quantity is the surface area, because surface area is more air moving across more of the material, transferring it to the environment. So very often, for example, if you look at C4 and C2, very similar chemical compositions. C2 is called sheet explosive. C4 is plastic explosive, very similar materials. But if you roll out sheet explosive, you get a larger surface area. If you fold it up, you reduce its surface area, and it takes longer for the air to push as many molecules out as if you had opened it up and folded it out. So it's really important to think about the surface area of the things that you're looking for. Now, as we take a look at this, packaging is going to make a difference. So when we look at the things that we're looking for, they're usually put in something. For example, an explosive or drugs are going to be packaged somehow. And that packaging can affect what we're going to do with it, because we want to take a look at the way the material itself and its relative volatility is going to be aided or impaired by how it's packaged. And each different thing, when we talk about that volatility, what you're looking for is vapor pressure. How much does that material want to push odor out away from it? I'm being anthropomorphic, but it actually does happen. Things have this different propensity for distributing molecules out into the environment. And that vapor pressure is fighting against the packaging. The higher the vapor pressure, the higher the likelihood it's going to push itself out of there. Lower the vapor pressure, it's going to be weaker. It's going to take longer time. You're going to have higher temperatures to maybe amplify the vapor pressure. So if you take a look at that and you have a source in there and you've got a big box like that, you can see that closer to that in the bottom, it's going to be a little stronger as it gets up here like that. This is why, for example, one of the things people will do is they will burp that object by pushing on it, hoping to push some of the odor out through the seams. But if you're in a situation where you can't do that, that may be a constitutional violation for you. Or if it's explosives, you may not want to go pushing on things that go boom. So it's your choice. But as we look at this thing, one of the things we want to look at is if we give it time, that odor that was kind of weak and up at the top now gets stronger. So up at the top of it now resembles what we had at the source before. And over time, it starts leaking out into the environment like this. And that is what your dog is smelling. There are other things that affect it, because not only is the vapor pressure an issue, but the headspace is. And the headspace is the amount of space between where the object is concealed in the packaging and where the packaging's access out is, how much room there is, how much volume inside that packaging area. So if you have a small substance in a big container, it takes longer for it to create enough pressure and push itself out to the environment. Whereas if you have a larger source in a smaller container, it doesn't take as long to do that because you're not fighting that volume trying to get at the point. Everything wants to get to homeostasis where there's a relative balance worth of molecules in the air. And inside that canister, you got to think about it. So in other words, if you have your source inside that same box, we've moved it down here. Now, all of a sudden you see you've got that. But if we took that same box and we put a bunch of other material in it, and then we put the source up on top of it, what we've effectively done is reduce the headspace. It's almost like simulating a smaller container and therefore getting that more pressure that's going to come out there that's going to help out. Time is your friend on this. The longer it sits in that container, the more it's going to want to push out in the environment, because the vapor pressure is going to start to build and build inside there until eventually it wants to go ahead and go on outside the packaging. And any leaks, any gaps, any porosity of the material itself, if that stuff is porous and odors can transfer through it, it'll do that. If it can't transfer through it, it's going to look for a seam, try and find a way out. That's why glass is considered, the premium medium to store your training aids in, because it's not as porous as almost anything else, including plastics. So one thing to remember is the materials in which you're putting things out in your hides are going to affect it, but also where you store it. By the way, if you're storing your things in quasi-permeable containers and they're near each other, your odors are blending, and you may want to change that practice about your